Oh, sole proprietor, Wyoming LLC, Delaware LLC, create a corporate fortress? What? Don't let them pierce the corporate veil? Register as a foreign entity? I'm not a foreigner. What is going? This is too much. I've had it. Deciding what type of entity structure to use for your developing real estate empire can be extremely overwhelming. There's so much misinformation out there. I'm going to break it down for you all right now. For rental property, I'm going to show you the basic structure you need to begin with, and then you'll be armed with information so you can get started. When I first started in 2015, I had all the same questions. I had no idea where to begin. It's all very confusing. There's so many different opinions out there. So now it's time that we're going to set the record straight. Over my investing career so far, I've set up something like a dozen LLCs across 7 or 8 different states. So I have a fair amount of experience on what it takes to get one set up in a variety of different situations. But I want to make clear, I am not an attorney and I'm not giving any sort of a legal or professional advice here. What I'm doing is I'm giving you enough information to be armed with good, reasonable questions to be asking an attorney when you hire one, so that the conversation doesn't go something like this one. All right there, young man, what can I do for you? I need to set up an LLC for my rental business. All right, will this be a manager managed or member managed LLC? Do what? I don't know. I just want it to do. You want it to do what? Well, you know, make money and not get sued and stuff. Son, do you even know what an LLC is? Well, doesn't it keep you from getting sued or something? No. It doesn't keep you from being sued. It limits your liability if you are sued. So you see, back in the year of 1977, the state of Wyoming first started the first LLC, but it didn't actually take off until 1991 when the state of Delaware started it. And from there, wait, hold up. Am I on the clock right now? Talking to attorneys can be absolutely infuriating. It can go just like that conversation if you don't know what you're talking about yet. They're expensive, they charge by the hour, and you absolutely need one. Just do your homework first so you're not being charged an arm and a leg for your ignorance. So I'm going to break this down into 5 questions that will walk you through the process of getting an LLC set up for your rental properties. And at the end, I'll answer one of the most confusing questions about LLCs regarding loans. Timestamps in the description below. Let's begin. Question number 1 is, why have an LLC in the first place? And the short answer is to separate your personal assets from your investments. So there's this concept of inside and outside liability. When you put something inside of an LLC, the liability is limited inside that container. If something happens to that LLC, then it's not liable to assets that are outside of it. So you want to keep your head around this idea of what is contained inside of an LLC is the risk domain, and what's outside of the LLC is not. So if you get sued on LLC A, then something happens to it and you have to get a judgment against you, that won't affect your personal assets and that won't affect your assets in LLC B, because they're outside the domain of that LLC. So let me be clear here though, an LLC does not prevent you from being sued in the first place. It only is a backstop for when you are sued and you lose and you get a judgment, that it's limiting the risk domain, the risk profile of your assets within that one LLC that got sued. Question number 2 is, do I need an LLC? And you don't have to have an LLC. There's no one going to make you have an LLC. It's your choice, and it's basically your decision based on how much risk you want to take on. You can buy rental properties with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac type loans and never ever get an LLC. Just go for years without having an LLC. I know investors who have 70 plus properties with no LLC. I don't think that's a good idea. I think they're vulnerable to a lawsuit. It could affect all of their properties and their personal assets, but it's a choice they made. But I think most of us would agree that having little groups of limited domains is probably a good practice and worth the overhead in the event of an unlikely lawsuit. Plus, it gets you in the practice of having good business practices where you're separating your personal money from your business money. You're having separate accounts, and your LLC is your account for your business, and your personal account is your account for your personal expenses. And this also can be very important to establishing a pattern that you are behaving like a business, and this limits the likelihood that someone could pierce the corporate veil, because you're maintaining true separation. All of your rental income goes into one business entity and goes into one business account, and all of your personal income goes into your personal account. Maintaining that separation makes filing taxes easier, and it develops a pattern that you can show to a judge that I'm acting like a business over here, I'm acting like myself personally over here. All right, question number 3, what type of LLC do you need to start now that we've established that you should have an LLC? Okay, and this is where it can get a little complicated, because if you were to ask 10 attorneys, you might get 10 different opinions. And a lot of it depends on your personal situation and what you're doing. So I'm throwing out the most basic scenario where you have no side businesses, you just have a W-2 income, and now you've decided to go out and do rental properties. And that's the scenario that I'm talking about here. It's the most common scenario that I come across. And in that instance, a simple LLC in the state that the property exists in is probably sufficient. There's a lot of options out there to build this elaborate corporate fortress with a Wyoming holding company that doesn't give away information about who the member is, and that's the beneficiary or the member of the LLC in Texas or Arkansas or Oklahoma or wherever you are. I think that's overkill if you're just getting started. As you grow a true rental empire, it then might make sense to build a more elaborate corporate structure where there's more complexity. But when you're first getting started, the cost of that are prohibitive, and keeping all those documents and policies in order is probably overkill for having 10 or less rental properties. So this is something you definitely want to hire an attorney to talk to, and I would actually recommend talking to 2, 3, 4, 5 different attorneys to ask their opinions so that you can get some insight as to what kind of questions they're asking, and you can kind of get your head around, oh, okay, so this guy's pitching the corporate fortress, this guy's saying, just keep it simple, you just need a simple LLC in the state of the property that you're in. And you can figure out what the fees might be for each structure, and then you can make an educated decision based on your risk profile. But since we're keeping it simple, and the way I find most people set up their structures is that they have an LLC in the state for which their properties reside. Most people when they first start are just buying 1 or 2 properties in one state, and that's where you would set up an LLC in that state. So if you're buying properties in Texas, then you would set up a Texas LLC. If you're buying properties in Georgia, you would set up a Georgia LLC. Okay, now that we've established that we're going to set up a LLC in the state that you have your properties, or you're going to have your properties, then how do I go about setting them up? That's question number 4. How do I set them up? So there's a couple options here. You can hire a local attorney for that state, or you can use an online service like LegalZoom or Nolo. I've actually done all 3 combinations, and I find that for a simple scenario where you're just having one member and you're the only member and you're going to buy a rental property, these online tools like LegalZoom or Nolo are completely sufficient. But if you have any doubts or you're operating in a state you're not familiar with, hire an attorney. It's worth the cost to hire an attorney to get things set up straight and correctly the first time. And whichever type of service you use, there's a few things you need to establish. You need to figure out what your name is. Your name can be anything that isn't trademarked and isn't already used in that state. And I would generally recommend that you not use your name if you want to maintain any sort of anonymity. So if your last name is Smith, don't put Smith Family Properties as your LLC name. Use something more generic so that it's not obvious that it's your LLC. And then you'll need a mailing address inside of the state for which the property exists and your LLC exists. If you live there, you could use your personal address. If you don't live there, then you'd want to use some sort of professional service like getting a PO box, or getting a UPS store, or getting some sort of online service like InkFile that can act as your registered agent. That's why you need an address. This is the address that if you get sued, or if you need to get notification from, say, the IRS or something, that's where they'll mail documents, is to your registered agent address. And so a lot of people try and use this registered agent address as a way to hide. And I think that's not a great idea, because if you do get sued, you want to get the notification, or if the IRS is trying to get a hold of you, you want to have a place where you can reliably get the mail and see it and then take appropriate action. And of course, if you're using one of these professional services that host an address for you, there are annual fees for having that service, but you need a mailing address in the state for which the LLC resides. And next, you'll need to apply for an EIN. And this is something that you can do using the irs.gov website. It's incredibly easy. They actually do a very good job of explaining how to do it. They have tutorials on this website, and a lot of people will offer to sell you a service to get your EIN for you. And there's just simply no reason to pay for it. It is so easy. You can do it if you know how. It takes like 5 minutes. You get your EIN right away, and it just is not difficult. It's something that's worth learning how to do. And so the last thing you do to get set up and have a viable LLC is to have an operating agreement drafted and signed by all the members of the LLC. And if it's just you, you're the only person signing. If you have partners, then your partners all need to sign it for it to be a executed operating agreement. And if you are using partners, I would highly recommend using a local attorney that knows the local state laws and is setting up the operating agreement so that when and if something doesn't go to plan, you use the operating agreement as a way to kind of unwind things. This is incredibly important. The operating agreement is what you'll fall back to when there's a disagreement. If it's just you as the one member of the LLC, you're unlikely to have a disagreement with yourself. I think using one of these online legal Zoom type services is probably sufficient. Again, if in doubt, just use an attorney. It's always a viable option to use an attorney. Don't be too cheap that you're not setting yourself up for success. All right, we're getting close to the end. The last question is, now what? Number 5, now what? You use your new EIN and your LLC documents to go to a bank that you want to bank at and set up a bank account that is a business bank account. Again, this is very important to establish this pattern that you are a business and not some person who has a hobby. And now that you have your bank account, you are now up and ready for business. You can accept rents, you can hire a property manager, you can apply for a loan that needs an LLC perhaps, and you now have it all set up. And altogether, doing this in most states that I've tried is probably something that takes 2, maybe 3 weeks at the most. In some states, you can do it as quick as 2 days. Like in my home state of Arkansas, I can set up an LLC and get a bank account all within a day, 1 or 2 business days. Whereas like in Texas or Georgia, there's like a 2-week process for the state to set up your LLC. Now let's remind ourselves the whole purpose of having this LLC. It is as a backstop for some sort of frivolous lawsuit, or if you actually did make some sort of accidental mistake, you didn't do some sort of maintenance, then the LLC prevents it from affecting your entire economic life. So let's just talk about some of the practices that prevent you from being sued in the first place. So fundamentally, be a good person, treat people right. That goes a long way. Secondly, do the proper maintenance on your properties. Get it inspected, get the safety issues taken care of, have carbon monoxide detectors, change the batteries in the smoke alarms, just the fundamentals that you just would do for your own house, do for your rentals as well. Don't be a slumlord. And then you have really good insurance. You buy liability protection insurance, and that will be your next line of defense in the event you get sued. Your insurance could step in and help you. And then your LLC steps in to help if you get sued and you're found that you did something wrong and you get a judgment and they try and collect on that judgment. That's when the LLC steps in and kind of confines and limits what that liability threshold is. Now remember, I promised to talk about the most confusing aspect of having rental properties regarding loans, and that's getting these 30-year fixed, very competitive interest rates loans that are backed by Fannie and Freddie. These are personal loans, and they are the best loans on the market. They have the best interest rates, they have the best terms, and they do not allow you to put the property into your LLC, which I know just flies in the face of everything I just talked about. That's just the cost of using this best loan product out there. It doesn't make any sense. It's just the way it is. I don't make the rules. So these rules basically say you have to have it in your personal name, and it can only be a property of 4 or less units. So a quadplex, triplex, duplex, or a single family are eligible for these personal types of loans. That's just the risk that you take by using these types of loans. Sooner or later, you will run out of your debt to income ratio or the number of slots that they allow you to have for these types of loans. And if you continue to grow your empire, you may have to go to other loan options. And these other loan options oftentimes prefer, sometimes even require, that you have your LLC in place. And they require that you put the property's name in your LLC and not your personal name, which is what you want to do anyway, for all these reasons we've been discussing throughout this whole video. So the good news is that you'll be ready and you've established the practice of keeping your business assets over here and your personal assets over here. Now that you've learned how to set up your LLC for the greatest success in building your rental empire, I've left a video for you right here on the mistakes to avoid when owning rental properties. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.